So I have to say, after watching, like films like Little Fockers and 2012, it's really refreshing to see a very character-driven film.
Like 2012. Yeah, I actually started writing this when I was doing 2012.
Really?
Yeah, because you're in a movie like that, it's you have a lot of downtime. So I had a lot of free time, and I don't know if you're ever spending time in Vancouver. It's where we shot it. It's an amazingly lovely place, and yeah, I just between all my downtime and sitting in my trailer, Joe, actually the guy who developed the story with me, he came out and started spending time with me out there, and started outlining the movie.
Yeah. Did you say, were you inspired by anything in that area, or any people, or anybody on set?
No.
No.
It was all very separate worlds. It was like the win-win world in 2012.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I say that who knows? There's always. It's a great thing about acting, right? Because I'm always in the world of storytelling, of creative. It's not like when I have spare time, I'm doing something completely uncreative, which is fine too. Sometimes you need to get away from it. But something about living in that world constantly that I think is good for me.
Can you pinpoint when you first got the idea for Win-Win?
The best I can do, and I say that because a lot of times I think I've pinpointed it and then I find a note or a piece of information or a photo that predates it, and then I have to rethink. It's like anthropology, you got to rethink the whole history and everything you've laid out. It's like when they've, this dinosaur, and then they find these bones, like, oops, we're off by 100 million years, our bad. But I do remember, right, because Joe and I were just talking about this. It was just about the end of April 2009, and I was doing press for The Visitor, and I was shooting Duplicity. I was kind of doing two things. I was walking around my apartment. It was a bit bleary, and I had this idea. So I called Joe, and it was that day I was walking around the apartment, and I just said, hey, I've been thinking about high school wrestling. Wouldn't it be funny to make a movie about that? And now this is a guy who's a lawyer, married, lives out in town. I grew up in. I've never thought about working with him. But we started laughing so hard about this. I said, you know what? Why don't you do this with me? Why don't we set it in New Providence? You'll be my in, and we'll do this. And he was like, yeah. I mean, think about it. This guy was really excited about it. So we just started doing it together, and he had a great aptitude for story, and we share a sense of humor, and that was that.
Did you have to educate him on the structure of story and the beats you have to hit, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3? Did you have to educate him?
I mean, I talked a lot about, but I was writing it.
Yeah.
So we would do is sit around like this and chat and be like, what about this, what about that? And I'd think about it. And of course, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. He's been being a lawyer for 20 years, so I was sort of guiding the ship a little bit.
Yeah.
But he brought a lot to the table. One, because he was fun to hang around with. Two, he was an elder law attorney.
Yeah.
Three, he lives in suburbia, so I could talk to him like he was a character. And also, like I said, he got stories. So he'd say, what about, and he had, I had no problem saying, no, oh, that's interesting, no, and here's why. And sometimes we would talk about process. I would kind of say, well, here's what you want to think about. But ultimately, I was trying to make a movie, so I didn't want to, it wasn't, for me, a tutorial session with Joe.
Right.
You always have enough downtime where you're talking about process anyway. And this is interesting, and do you think, and, sometimes his point of view on things was pretty nascent, for lack of a better word. He's just sort of wrapping his mind around stuff that I've been doing for a long time, and other writer friends of mine have been doing for a long time. But it was kind of fun. Still made a good time.
You always start with character. You say that all the time.
I feel like that.
Now, do you find inspiration from real life people, or is it birthed in your imagination?
A little bit of both, depending on the situation. There's probably a little bit of Joe and Mike. There's definitely some wrestlers that we followed that reminded me a little bit of Alex, and then Alex showed up and he was a wrestler. It's a funny picture. He's so deadpan. But there's a little bit of everything, I think, and sometimes you steal from people. I think even with Jackie, it was like I'd steal a little bit from my sister, from my mother, from Joe's wife, from people that just kind of reminded me of. Sometimes from Alex's mom. Like when she got on set, she struck me a lot like Jackie. I was like, wow, this is so funny. She would say something and I'd be like, that's good.
Yeah. So do you feel like as a writer, it's mainly you're just sponging off details from real life and then just kind of putting them on paper? Or do you think it's, more from imagination?
Both. It's a healthy mix, and it really depends on the story. It probably varies from time to time like this. I'm not a rip from the headlines guy, and I'm not autobiographical in that way. And a lot of it does come from the imagination. But your imagination is still based on real elements. They have to be. Otherwise, what is it? It's then you're making something completely kooky. And even if you are, it's still based on certain elements of humanity or someone's humanity that's tough to deny.
Yeah, Paul Giamatti's character actually, the film is about him making a very poor and, bad decision, basically. How do you ensure that the audience still likes him, even though he's making a bad decision?
I didn't know. I didn't know. That was a big, you almost got to finish it and let people see it. And, I say finish it, shoot it, and write it and shoot it. But yeah, there's always that element of how far did we go, and sometimes you go too far. And I think Paul's likable. There's something about him. Yeah. People like him. Maybe it's because he's incredibly talented, but something about his personality. If you met him in a bar and didn't know him, you'd get a kick out of him. He's a funny, soulful, intelligent, odd guy. Look, you see a guy in the morning, you see he's a good dad, you see he's a good husband, you see he's sincere. It's like his wife says goodbye, he says bye, and he's not judging it. He says, I love you. He's what you see is what you get. Yeah. Which is what a small town lawyer should be. Yeah. And he wasn't sarcastic and depressed and all these things. He just not that those were bad things, but he was just a pretty straightforward guy. And I think the way he plays that in the first 5 minutes as an audience, you're like, all right, I got this guy.
It wins you. Yeah. What were the greatest challenges for when you were writing, and how did you overcome those?
I think the biggest one was making clear the elder law predicament and what exactly Mike does, and what Leo's rights are, and what Leo's entitled to, and how Mike betrays that on some level, and not only making it clear, but making it active, making it interesting for an audience. Because quite honestly, like what you see in that courtroom and that sort of really lifeless, bureaucratic feel to it is pretty much how it is. So I really wanted to get that, because I thought this is what being a lawyer is really like. It's not like Law and Order or a lot of those law shows you see. This is small town law, and so it was to capture that, make it interesting, make it clear, make it compelling.
I love the whole story, but I think the best parts for me are the smaller moments. Like, it's quiet, nothing said, but it's that moment that's really touches me.
I mean, I think those moments have to be earned, right? You can't make a whole movie of those moments, otherwise they don't pay off. But I'm a big believer in that, in the quiet moments, and I think, although my movies are relatively quiet and the pace is a little bit slower than some, I think those are my favorite, and I could probably cite 3 or 4 or 5 more very quickly that just that I think sort of round out the humanity of the film, that make it feel a little bit more multi-dimensional and lived in than just something that's driving all the time. You know what I mean? I think whenever you can kind of find those pockets of air, I think audiences, I mean, you said you appreciate it, and I hear it all the time from audiences, that they get that.